Hello, welcome to the Astrology of Action. This video concerns the current financial crisis and how it is reflected in the charts of the solar eclipse, which is influential for the following 6 months after which it occurs. The solar eclipse was exact in August 1st, 2008, 6:15 a.m. for Washington, D.C. Now, to get the big picture, I've found more and more in my research that the solar eclipses, which happen every 6 months, are, as Buzz Myers put it, a time where the energy moves forward. It really sets the tone for the next 6 months. It really seems to show the new chapters that the world goes through, since there's such a closing of accounts and a starting over, such an intense rebirth at the solar eclipse. Solar eclipse is essentially a new moon, a new beginning. However, it's more, it's way more exact in that the moon is aligned exactly with the sun, eclipsing the sun. So it's a super new moon. I've gone over this in other videos. So backing up a little bit, it's very interesting. The solar eclipse that happened in Aquarius back in February was actually aligned with the planet Mercury exactly. Mercury is the messenger said to exalt in Aquarius. So there was something in the air about a new messenger, a new revolutionary of some sort coming to the fore. A new consciousness, since Mercury rules the mind as well. I feel that this relates a lot to Barack Obama as this a new type of messenger focused on the future, very Aquarian themes. Some charts I've seen do have Aquarius rising in Obama's chart. So a new messenger emerging at that solar eclipse. Now we have the solar eclipse in Leo, which we are in the process of working out that energy. At the time in which it happens, we're in a very subjective state, so we just feel the energy, and it takes a few months for it to play out to get a sense of what this eclipse is all about. So here we are, almost exactly 2 months after that eclipse. It is September 27th, the time of the making of this video, and we've entered Mercury retrograde, and all hell seems to be breaking loose and fear going around all over the planet, and I'll come back to that. Now, when we look at the chart for the solar eclipse for August 1st, 2008, set for Washington, D.C., we see that this is a very, very intense solar eclipse. Why? Because as the solar eclipse occurred, the moon eclipsing the sun, it happened exactly across the horizon, the eastern horizon. So the sun and moon were rising in the east exactly on the ascendant at 9 degrees Leo. There's a very fiery combination, Leo being a fire sign and the ascendant being connected with Aries, ruled by Mars. Now, this is like a very, very hot, fiery influence that in that sense does not lend itself to any type of stability whatsoever. Fire is very dynamic, very volatile, and is relatively unpredictable compared to earth, air, and water. Let's just say a highly fiery combination, along with Mercury in Leo rising, the South Node, which is power, in Leo rising. The problem.
Now, Leo is the sign in astrology that reflects kings and monarchy. And this is an amazing synchronicity that has occurred. As some of you may notice, that Newsweek crowned Henry Secretary Paulson King Henry on its latest cover. And I'm looking at an article on Business Day which is titled King Henry Paulson at the Pinnacle of Power. And Leo is one that just likes to take the reins of power without much explanation or detail, which is the following sign, Virgo. And Christopher Dodd had this to say, quote, "This proposal is stunning and unprecedented in its scope and lack of detail," referring to the 3-page proposal for the $700 billion bailout. Now, also in this angle of high focus, we have Venus in Leo rising. Now, Venus is the planet of money and financial matters, and it does not bode well for it to be in Leo, which is a natural square to Taurus, its ruler. In 2007, the market took quite a tumble while Venus was retrograde in Leo. Also, Venus in Leo is a perfect metaphor for our overextended egos, our overly luxuriant natures, overindulgence, and over-speculation, which we're all paying a price for. Another way that we can see this operating negatively with Venus in Leo, surrounded by all these other fiery planets, is that our Venus, or money, is being burned up in a sense.
As we move into the second house of resources, we have some heavy planets. We have Saturn, which is contraction, Saturn in Virgo, which means we're in a 2-year period of dealing with a great deal of analysis and criticism. Definitely related to financial matters, at least for the next 6 months, according to this chart. Also, we have Mars in the second house. These are two traditionally malefic or negatively affecting planets in the house of money, in the sign of Virgo, which gets overwhelmed with analysis and criticism, but wants to be very industrious and work out the problem. So going back to the first house for a moment, focus on the first and second house here. Right around the time of this eclipse, shortly after, we saw the very bombastic and Leo-like Democratic convention in Denver, with egos exploding with huge fireworks and all manner of celebration, where we could see this Leo energy really manifesting as quite the political showman. And then, of course, we had the following week the Republican National Convention, basically the same thing, and all the drama that went on with Sarah Palin being revealed to be the presidential running mate for McCain. All very, very Leo type stuff. I do believe Sarah Palin has a good bit of Leo going on in her chart. So there was certainly a lot of showmanship going on related to this solar eclipse. It's remarkable. Again, it's right also on a house of fire, Aries house in the first house. A lot of bombast, a lot of putting on a show. Now the show is over, and the reality is hitting hard, the reality check, which always comes with a Saturn aspect. The Sun conjoined Saturn. In this chart, back in earlier part of September, reality started to hit home. I do also want to come back to the first house later concerning the theme of fear, which is very important, how this has come up as well. We just saw the exuberant, positive, extroverted, spontaneous side of Leo on the first house cusp with this powerful solar eclipse, as I just mentioned. But there's also a shadow side of fear, which we've just also ran ashore. Realized that when the stock market began to its decline around September the 12th, we were just leading up to the full moon in Pisces. The one full moon out of the year which is in Pisces. Pisces is the sign of the marketplace. It is the most oceanic sign, ruled by Neptune, god of the sea, where we get the word currency from, the current that flows, currency, marketplace. Uranus is in Pisces for 7 years. Uranus, the planet of sudden shock, revolutionary changes, which is a perfect symbol for this new type of market that we're in, this unpredictable market. Uranus in Pisces, creating a lot of shifts in the entire economic paradigm, you could say, in the marketplace. So what's remarkable is that this particular full moon aligned exactly with Uranus in Pisces, around 20 degrees. So there was bound to be various types of shakeups, revolutionary nature in the financial market. It's pretty black and white. The market tumbled 500 points one day, 500 points the next day, etc. The volatility was amazing. As you see in the solar eclipse chart, we talked a little bit about the second house, Mars and Saturn and Virgo. Some pretty tough stuff, quite the contrast to the Leo matters in the first house. The other financial house, of course, is the 8th house, which is money shared, money merged resources, banks, investment banks especially, this type of thing. This is exactly where we have Uranus. Falls right in this 8th house, in this solar eclipse chart. So the full moon, around exactly on September 15th, was conjunct Uranus. The full moon is, of course, very unstable, ups and downs, high tides, emotional and otherwise. So we saw that playing out. So what we're doing is we're watching the transits around the solar eclipse chart. So at this point. Now, the other trigger in terms of all the activity surrounding the crisis has been happening in the 3rd house. As Mercury, Venus, and Mars were trekking through Libra, sign ruled by Venus, which is the money planet, about values, there began to be a consciousness of this crisis, and Mercury, the little trickster of astrology, came right up to the planet Mars and stationed. Mars in Libra. Libra, again, is Venus, money, values. Mars is a bit of quite a wrench thrown into our plans with Libra. Mars rules Aries. Mars is in its fall in Libra. It's out of place. It's a chicken in the hen house, so to speak, ruffling feathers and creating a lot of chaos and fear. We're going to come back to Mars and fear in just a moment. So Mercury has just made its amazing slowdown, conjunct Mars exactly, right as it stopped to go backwards and set us into this tumultuous review of what is happening. Okay? And trying to balance accounts, Libra, trying to be very fair-minded and just with this financial crisis. It's in the 3rd house in this chart, so it's all about a media frenzy, communication, something that's affecting our immediate environment, our minds, our outlook upon our day-to-day lives. This is all very 3rd house stuff. Venus has just shifted into Scorpio. So it was having kind of a nice time in Libra, its own sign, and now it has headed into its fall, its downturn in Scorpio. Very dramatic sign. Venus in Scorpio is always going to throw some stress on any financial or emotional or relationship matters. I was curious to pull up this chart and look at it because not only Mercury and Mars, but especially Venus were heading right down towards the nadir of this solar eclipse chart. That is the bottom of the chart. We are bottoming out, and it's again, very black and white terms in this transit around the solar eclipse chart. You can't get any lower. There's nowhere else to go but up. Okay? Venus in its fall, Mars in its fall, or these planets are in their detriment, you could say. So Mercury is throwing us into this review period, as in terms of what's been going on, and in terms of the social consciousness, we'll talk again about Mars and fear. It recently occurred to me working on an article about Mars that Mars is the god of war, and wherever you have war, even in terms of like a noble standing up for a cause, there's soon to follow death and destruction. So there's a shadow side. So wherever you have Mars with the first house, there is an underlying intense fear. You could say it's the Mars-Pluto dynamic. Pluto is the sort of undercurrent of Mars. So in psychological terms, there's always an issue of fear that we're dealing with the first house. Shall I step out and go it alone and be courageous, Aries, or am I going to succumb to this shadowy fear? So this is strongly emphasized in the solar eclipse chart. Not only that, but Mercury came and conjoined right on it, right here at September 24th, where all this gloom and doom and fear and hell breaking loose and all these types of metaphors are going flying around. Barack Obama said himself, we should be in a state of urgency. Everyone is chiming in that way. Realize that one of the moons of Mars is named Phobos, which is Greek for fear. One other aspect I want to point out is how the Mercury-Mars conjunction was in conjunct an aspect to Uranus. Right as the Mercury retrograde began, conjoined Mars, it was an aspect of radical adjustment to that 8th house Uranus. So that really shows us the financial matters. It was moving in an 8th house pattern and move into a kind of a 6th house pattern, which is very intense for a retrograde because it brings up both a 6 and 8 quality. 6 related to Virgo and 8 related to Scorpio. That 6 quality is about cleaning everything up, cleaning up the mess, getting rid of the garbage, throwing out the garbage. The 8th house quality is about breaking everything down totally and starting completely over again. So it's clean it up and tear it down, completely start over again. Very, very intense angle because it shifted directions. It created one angle and then in a sense shifted to create another angle involving Mercury, Mars, and Uranus in that 8th house. That in and of itself really sums up the intensity of this 4th week in September. Pluto, which is hidden power, is in the 5th house, which is Leo's house. Uranus is mere 8 degrees from squaring that. So we're really looking at this Uranus-Pluto square from the 5th house to the 8th house. And with, you can bring, Mars, definitely, and Saturn, creating a big T-square. And Richard Tarnas pointed out at the Blast Conference that this is exactly the pattern that happened at the Great Depression. T-square, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto. Same thing that happened in the 1930s. He just threw that out there. It was brilliant. It is in his book, Cosmos and Psyche. I highly recommend that book. So there's the relationship between that big, larger pattern. We could go on and on with this. Aquarius, which opposes Leo, is we the people. We the people need to take charge. We the people are the counterbalance to this whole issue. And we want clarity, which is reflected in Neptune and Aquarius. And the North Node there. North Node is our purpose, what we are supposed to be growing into. Aquarius is all the humanitarian and idealistic visions that we have for ourselves. Chiron, the planet of uncertainty. Chiron is the uncertainty principle. The symbol is a key for its ability to open doorways. It has a destabilizing influence. It is a degree from the North Node. The North Node is sort of a magnet for archetypes or activity and bringing it onto this planet. So we might try to see this in terms of a healthy uncertainty, a healthy change, because it's inevitably just brought into the planet at this time. Of course, we have Jupiter in Capricorn, which highlights the seriousness of things, along with the Saturn and Mars in these Earth signs. And while we were touching on Jupiter and Capricorn, this is a good moment to expand this topic. Of course, Jupiter is expansion, faith, hope, opportunity, and the sign of the top dog of Capricorn, the higher-ups, the government. So obviously we're putting our faith in government at this crucial, critical turning point in our history. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, which means of utmost importance, and relates to a turning point in major decisions. This is all throughout 2008. We have this Jupiter and Capricorn theme, and flowing with the Saturn. There's a trine between Saturn and Jupiter, so that is a little bit of good news for us in astrological terms, with these giant social planets that deal with the structure of our society, expansion, and then conservatism, contraction, Saturn are actually working together. So maybe it's not so hard in a moment of crisis for Democrats and Republicans to get together and work things out. It's going to be part of the underlying lesson that we're tuning into here. But while we're on the subject of Capricorn, there's a lot going on around discussion about Pluto in Capricorn. And just to throw out my brief way that I would like to put it, is that we just went through 13 years of Pluto in Sagittarius, which is the sign of expansion ruled by Jupiter. So this, of course, reflects the sort of overexpansion, sort of bloating of our society, overextending ourselves in all these manner of ways. We could call it the great expansion that just happened. Now we're paying the price for waking up with this big hangover as Pluto edges into Capricorn, the next sign, which will be in for 12 years. So we have the great expansion, and now we're shifting into the great contraction. Okay, so this is the big picture stuff, is Pluto. It's interesting how Pluto is retrograded a bit back into Sagittarius at this particular time, at 28 degrees Sagittarius. So it really is like, bringing the issue of the great overexpansion and the big overextended mess, into our consciousness and making us deal with it before we move on to the great contraction period. There's a lot of foreboding about this Pluto in Capricorn. We need to look beyond it to see that beyond the further intensification of Capricorn issues, as Michael Luton points out in his videos, more surveillance, more government control, things like this. He also points out how there will be a backlash against that. Pluto will enter Aquarius in 2025. So it's a mere 12 years, one Jupiter cycle of Pluto in Capricorn. So we Aquarians, we New Agers, people that are looking forward to a more equitable society and a more hopeful society, have Pluto in Aquarius to look forward to in 2025. Even though Uranus is going to square Pluto in 2012, creating a lot of a new tension, a new rebirth, which will likely be very tumultuous, momentous, dramatic, intense, like the 1960s. Pluto will at some point reach 16 Capricorn, which is a trine to 16 Virgo, which was the beginning of the cycle, of the Uranus-Pluto cycle in 1966, it was exact. So we're really in a period of transition from Pluto entering Capricorn to this stressful rebirth with the Uranus square as Pluto finally reaches 16 Capricorn, which I believe will be a point of resolution, of flow, where the dreams, the hopes, the values that emerged in the 1960s will begin at that point. Now, returning to the solar eclipse chart for August 1st, 2008, we're going to take a look at the Sabian symbol for the solar eclipse, which will be read at 10 degrees Leo, from Dane Rudhyar's astrological mandala, the Sabian symbols, 360 symbols. The symbol for 10 degrees Leo is early morning dew sparkles as sunlight floods the field. The exalted feeling that rises within the soul of the individual who has successfully passed through the long night which has tested his strength and faith. Rudhyar says that these symbols are the best way to handle a situation. The cold air of night having precipitated upon the field of man's consciousness the moisture of his deepest feelings, this widely spread dew is blessed with the light of significance by the rising sun of the new day. Even tears can be transformed into jewels in the light of victory over night and sorrow. Quite a dramatic symbol. The would-be reformer has to meet many emotional problems as he begins his work of creation. Creation means transformation. The reformer is actually a transformer if he is truly a creative and inspired individual, open to the spirit that, quote, makes everything new. The building of a new society and of one's renewed personality as well is just as much a process of artistic creation as the making of a delicate glass vase or a symphony. The key word is transfiguration. Well, we're definitely going through some major changes, some major renewal, deaths and rebirths. Rudhyar hit the nail right on the head there. We hope that our leaders will take their time during this Mercury retrograde period, which is 3 weeks. As we all know in the astrological world, it's very important to not make major decisions at this time, to do so with a great deal of awareness. Well, we'll see you next time. Thank you.